Ted Berrigan and I wrote a collaboration called Memorial Day, and Ted quoted Tulli, and this was not so accurate either. Tulli was saying, so I figured I might as well be dead. Nothing happened. I landed in the water and I wasn't dead. So just to do a little palinode. A palinode is a piece where you take back what you've said. I don't think he ever lost his ability to love. But Ted actually had in his mind this conversation with Tulli. Heard him perform, of course, on McDougal Street. And I was not exactly a slum goddess of the Lower East Side. I was trying to raise money for the poetry project, being a horrible administrator part-time I wasn't so good at. Anyway, you know, they broke the mold with Tulli. I hadn't seen him much in the last years, maybe about 2 years before he died. Working a lot with Stephen Taylor, who of course was one of Tulli's heart sons. So these are just a couple of little bits I'll dedicate to Tulli, and maybe I'll sing a little Blake song. Dentalia, dentigerous, denudate, deontology, deorbit, D-Day, Etesian winds, etherify, in utero, invariant, unpollinated, female, sensimilla. I'll put my syntax on you. Ending soon, what is known from here? A spill, chaff, subtext, chomp at the bit, bruxism, or annals of the nocturnal animal, sackcloth and ashes. You noble diggers all stand up now, stand up now. You noble diggers all stand up now. Your houses they pulled down, stand up now, stand up now. Your houses they pulled down, stand up now. Your houses they pulled down to fright your men in town. But the gentry must come down and the poor shall wear the crown. Stand up all diggers now, stand up now, diggers now, stand up now, all diggers all stand up now. Black with painted flames and devils are weird polis, solubility, but Tulli, keep your spirit home. Your houses they pull down, stand up now, stand up now. You noble diggers all stand up now. Yeah! Listen, Judith Molina. Never forget that. Okay, this is the beautiful Blake song, Garden of Love, with a tune by Allen Ginsberg. And Tulli stayed in the Garden of Love. I went to the Garden of Love and saw what I never had seen. A chapel was built in the midst where I used to play on the green. And the gates of this chapel were shut, and thou shalt not rid over the door. So I turned from the Garden of Love that so many sweet flowers bore, and I saw it was filled with graves and tombstones where flowers should be, and priests in black gowns were walking their rounds and binding with briars our joys and desires. So we've got to keep fighting against the black gowns, binding with briars our joys and desires, and that's what Tuli Kupferberg was about. Thank you.
another piece that Tulli wrote in the East Side Scene from 1968, and I wanted to share that one. It's called The Young Faces Have Broken into Beauty. My generation was a degeneration of the mind. They prepared blue plans for imaginary skyscrapers with real suicides. My degeneration had morals. It practiced spontaneity. It preached the new man, by which it means to return the revolution to the humanity of my grandfather. The young ones are terrifying. Their faces have broken to a new beauty. I do not understand them. So be it. When beauty barks, I heal. I am running, crying, leaping toward the real. Thank you.
Well, I went to a party the other night. I wanted to feel my mind getting right, so I picked up a bottle and I started to drink wine. I thought pretty soon I'd be feeling fine, but I could not and get high. Oh no, and I don't know why. So I took out my pipe and I stuck it full of grass. I took out a match and I lit it real fast. I huffed and I puffed and I smoked and I toked. But after a while my heart was fairly broke, 'cause I could not get high. Oh, 'cause I don't know why. Well, I got out my tube of LSD and I sat down and waited for it to hit me. I waited and meditated, but I couldn't get stoned. I had to get up and head for home, 'cause I could not get high. God damn, I don't know why. Thank you.
But as almost everybody here in the room knows, in fact, probably everybody in the room knows, Tulli was one of those persons that once you met him, you all just thought your life had already improved.
3 minutes, Michael.
It's called the King of Nothing. Tulli created so much nothing, you can't help but step in it. Piles of nothing, like a bloated cur crapping down Delancey Street, announcing through a goofy grin, "Carpe diem, baby, death's a-comin' in." A little finch had whispered in his ear since 1964, while he was banging clang racket rhythm on an old iron manifold, tripping the slight fantastic. Libran air with a wincing squint and Cantor's burr. Nothing never sounded so weighty, so motherfucking momentous. Beneficent nihilists cheerfully embracing nothing, bearded beatnik existentialists into the moment, because that bastard, death's a-comin' in. You can barely smell it. This true child of the Lower East, radiant, a sun that burns fiercely until out, because the sun too knows it will die. Supernova, torch Uranus on fire, careen the moon into icy Neptune. But in the meantime, meaning and time can be so mean. Time fragile as any flower. You could sing to the rhododendrons, stick daisies in rifle barrels, or teach yourself fugging. Play a flute, take long walks. How many staring contests did you lose against the void? No pie in the sky, but the one at our feet. Probably thrown by Aaron Kay at last night's party. Or the Yippie party. Or Dalachinsky's birthday party.
That's tomorrow.
Even without X-ray specs, saw through the self-evident absurdity of war, commodity capitalism, yada, yada, yada. freaks and free-thinking wanderers whose humility bespoke vast and arcane knowledge. Clown prince of nothing, grown to leer-like sage, in the old neighborhood where nothing will soon be anything like it was, your loss leaves so much more nothing, or maybe so much less. A huge hollow sinkhole, a crater called Kupferberg that has swallowed the Lower East Side, disgorging nothing.
The work of love is long and boring. No one can live the damn thing. It's full of charts and facts and figures and instructions for dancing. But I love it when you read to me and you can read me anything. The book of love has music in it. In fact, that's where music comes from. Some of it is so transcendental. Some of it is just really dumb. But I love it when you sing to me and you can sing me anything. The book of love is long and boring and written very long ago. It's full of flowers and heart-shaped boxes and things we're all too young to know. But I love it when you give me things and you ought to give me wedding rings. I love it when you give me things and you ought to give me wedding rings.
So I'm just going to read you this chapter. It's entitled, The Land of Good Humor. That summer he got a job with Good Humor. He was nervous, and the manager gave him a territory in Bay Ridge in a park. He worked on straight commission, 17 to 22%, according to a staggering system. So now he was a peddler like his ancestors had been. At the office they always called him salesman, but on their funny white carts an iron tag said licensed peddler, NYC number 4798. Pushing the cart 2 miles each way was some task in the heat. At first he liked the kids, but then they got on his nerves. There was one Irish family of about 12 kids. But this was a cold neighborhood, these Norwegians. No kids in the streets, quiet at night. They all stayed home, like in the North Country. There was a big brick church on his route. It was beautiful, so perfectly Nordic, brown brick with brown yellow stained glass windows, a touch of blue, so conservative, quiet, refined, spiritual, calm. It had a few Romanesque arches, one central and 2 side. The windows went up into Gothic, then light brown brick, then white roof facing a gable white sandstone. The high Roman arch square glass windows, the brown and white, and then the sky, no cross. The thing dragged on and the job became horrible. He worked 15 hours a day, 6 days a week. These are the hours my grandfather worked. He earned good money, but it wasn't good for those hours. He was doing useless work, no doubt about it, a salesman's job, seeing that the kids didn't steal the cream, taking the coin of the realm, making change. The bookkeeping at night was farcical, and they had one of those coin counting machines that went club. The manager was a tyrant who made a commission, it was rumored, on the peddlers, salesmen's commissions. He made the men go out on rainy days. Some days Dave would earn $2 after being out for 12 hours. The salesmen liked to cut one another's throats for the better routes, and some of them were averaging 40 to 50, but the branch average was about 30 a week. He got up mornings at 9 and returned home at midnight. He had no time for friends, girls, but most of all, no time to read. He tried reading in the park, but it was hard, the kids always bothering him. He gave away free ice cream to the poor kids. He liked it when, while he was pushing on the way home, some Italian kid he had never seen would come up and laugh and joking say, "Give me free ice cream," and he would give it to him. Because he liked the kids just asking for it like that, and that's the way it should be. He figured out how absolutely useless his job was, how refrigerators could be placed on the street corners or in parks, serviced once a week or every few days, and people could come and take their favorite ice cream. Free, of course. Free, free. Let the whole world be free. Each day he would go a different way, but the best way lay along the Italian street, next to the railroad yards. Each house, poor houses, had its garden, its vines and tomatoes and farmers, old men hoeing, lots of kids running in the street hollering. It was funny. He wore a white uniform, Sam Brown belt, ensign's cap, insignia, and the erstwhile assistant manager told him, "And we like to give our customers a salute." He gave a short, snappy one. David nearly burst out laughing, but he needed the job, so he gave one. "Like this?" he asked, snapped sharp to attention and saluted. "That's it," said the assistant manager, and those were his last words when he left the garage that day. "And remember, we give him that salute." David snapped into it and left. On the job, he would wear his hat sideways for the girls, and then backwards. He put his jacket on backwards. He would cock his hat at a 90-degree angle, sidewise, and then salute as if his face were where the peak of the cap was. He got a big kick out of that. Oh, this was America, the land of good humor. Why do I always feel an alien here? What have I to do with this, David said. That day he walked into the good humor office and looked about him. All day long, the workman works like a slave, goes home to his stinking flat, eats, beats his wife, falls dead asleep and hollers, "I'm happy, I'm an American." And the rabbi said as he snored, "Good evening, good humor." And they gave him a booklet called Making Good with Good Humor. Your problems are our problems. No human hand touches a good humor from the time the plant, like it's said in the automat, untouched by human hands. And how the loader picked up the one fallen on the floor and gouged out the dirt with his finger. It was frilled coconut, and he could do it. Also untouched by human hands, and the sugar and the chock full of nuts had stamped on it in green little bags. Untouched by human hands. Oh Lord, a country. One day he could stand a job no longer, so he quit. Then in succession he became a messenger, stamper in a leather goods firm, general hand in a knitting mill, a fancy plastic button place, a luggage worker. A messenger, he would walk the streets. And as he would walk the streets of the city, he would see torn branches and leaves and beans and tomato seeds in the streets and orange pits and watermelon seeds and bush branches and tree branches and torn flowers. And he would pick those up and plant them and scatter the seeds on earth so they would grow. And he planted the torn branchlings. And he planted more and more until they became too many for him. And he cried, "Oh Lord, oh Lord." And the field of cicadas, thousands of them stuck in the grass, the shells, and some had molted successfully, and the shell remained, and hundreds were caught and died there, and he saw them, and he cried, "Oh Lord, oh Lord, oh Lord." He couldn't keep a job longer than 2 weeks. And the only halfway constructive job, the sweater knitting mill, he got fired when he refused to carry 2 bundles of yarn at a time. New York, the parasite city, in his messenger job, he visited all the towering office buildings around 42nd Street. The titles on the doors sickened him. Lawyers, accountants, dentists, with B's, salesmen, insurance offices, advertising agencies, colossal ones, buyers, importers, exporters, thousands, colossal hives of parasites. New York lived off the rest of the country, all these people doing useless work, throwing away their lives. In the fall, he went back to school with $200. This would keep him with scrimping for about 5 months. And then he would have to go out into the city again and find some money and do something which society feels worthwhile and rewarding, like making a profit selling hot chocolate or advertising soya flakes or bartering condoms at a spanking profit. So that's Tulli's reminiscence of being a working man.
Before I knew that I was going to study compassion, Tuli was my master. Look here, I am weeping as I write this, thinking of his open heart and the pain. Happy birthday, Tuli.
Since we were both into songwriting and poetry, we're talking, I think, about, I'm not sure about the exact details, the idea about how poets are poetry. So I'd like to do this in his honor. And it's just it looks like a lot, but it's not a lot because I'm nearsighted, so it's written in giant type. This is called Reports of Her Death Are Greatly Exaggerated. Because I don't think Tulli is gone. He's here with us. Poetry is not dead. Poetry is not dead. Poetry was buried by 1,000 mourners in the pop press amid glorious wreaths made of lilies that spelled out her name that read, farewell. They wept into delicate handkerchiefs, but poetry is not dead. Poetry walks among us on the teeming streets, Whitman and Tuli. So filled with our exuberant lives, poetry is not dead. Poetry was stabbed in a dark alley, where fear made ghosts of the fog and the night hurtled into its own misgivings. She lay there on the cobbled stones, lifeblood draining, carmine swirling into glistening pools, but poetry is not dead. Poetry is pacing the rooms of academia, switchblade in hand, hoping some smirking pedant will expose his soft underbelly, so she can rip out his entrails with one swift slice. Poetry is not dead. Poetry was drowning in a sea of self-aggrandizing memoirs, left gasping in a sargasso entanglement with the trite, the hackneyed, the conventional. Wobbling silver bubbles appeared at the surface when she slipped beneath the foaming mouth of the priggish, the peacocks, the poseurs, but poetry is not dead. Poetry is spinning and reeling in the arms of truth. Her gown shimmers liquid, evanescent. She leaps acrobatically across the centuries like the arc of a rainbow into the breathing dawn of understanding. She whirls triumphant in a tango with death, phantoms, Stygian hordes still breathing. Poetry was gang-raped and left for dead on a lonely highway that led to the vision of vengeance, along a stream of consciousness, beyond the valley of the shadow of doubt, where the road is forked and so are their tongues, where silence is a color and emptiness a way of life, but poetry did not die.
Honest about my relationship with Tuli. Now, I don't even know how to go into this. When I used to see Tuli at the Unbearables readings and associations and coffee places, Tuli would come here, and as soon as Tuli came, I went the opposite direction because I have a bad habit with 60s icons.
Me too.
Very bad. I drooled on Andy Warhol when I was on methadone at Max's, and then I hung out with Anita Pallenberg, and I told her she was fat. So I wanted to have one 60s icon where there would be no bad karma. You know, because I was with Nico when she was a little, her and her son was shooting heroin, I was hanging out with her. And it was just like, every 60s icon, I had a double, Allen Ginsberg, I had a bad thing with him once. I said, let me just leave this guy alone. Let me have one 60s icon, have a good memory of Huberman. So every time he used to come by, I would say, oh, let me go the opposite direction so we'll have a good energy at least. And really, that's my Tuli story. Because I just wanted to, have a 160s icon. Holly wouldn't threw me out of the house because I wouldn't suck a dick. So, let me just have one 60s icon where we just kind of a good, maybe he'll never get to know me, but he'll say, oh, I see that guy around, he looks like a nice guy. Let me at least let him have that memory. And that's my Tuli story, and that's all I gotta say. But thanks for having me.
Probably 10 or 15 minutes.
I got to know Tuli also mostly when he got involved with the Unbearables. But the Thugs were very important to me when I was young. I happened to be growing up across the street from where they were performing on McDougal Street, and I saw them over a dozen times. So it was really nice to realize that Tuli had written so much of the songs for the Thugs. The other thing that I liked about him, he had a song that went something like just a second-rate poet on the Lower East Side, and it was so nice in a community where so many. I'm not saying Tuli was second-rate. I suspect he was first-rate, but in a community where so many second-rate poets think they're geniuses, here was someone who was actually willing to concede the idea that. Maybe he wasn't the top run, but anyway, this is a very short poem. A new wrinkle on an older face. Tuli was always older. He was the oldest thug when the others were very young. Now, after the embalmer did his work, he looked blue. This is not a jazz statement. Tuli was a rock and roller, sort of.